But Parshas Bo, that we'll read in a few days in Yirtzeh Hashem, in the Sefer Minchas Osher, Rav Osher Weiss spends a ton, maybe 10 pages or more, on the first mitzvah of Taryag, recorded here in Parshas Bo, HaChodesh Hazel Lachem Rosh Chodashim. What's included in that mitzvah? How is it accomplished? Does that mitzvah apply even today? The issue of how many mitzvos might be included under this pasuk became the subject of a great controversy. There are really three different parts to this mitzvah. And let me list them for you. And if you could jot this down, that's good. Number one is called cheshbon. Cheshbon is a process by which the new moon is determined in a halachic way. That new moon is called the molad. And it really could only be determined by calculation. That calculation is called cheshbon. But at the time of the Mishnah, as recorded in Masechta Rosh Hashanah, witnesses would come into Bezdin. And based on their testimony and a variety of somewhat complex calculations on the part of the Bezdin, the cheshbon would come to its culmination. And there would be a determination that such and such would be the day of Rosh Chodesh. Then we move on to another part of the mitzvah, and that is Kiddush. Now, it's quite possible that cheshbon was calculated by a group of experts, of scholars, but the Kiddush must be implemented by the Bezdin HaGadol, the High Court of Israel, made up of 71 elders. And the Rambam is very outspoken about this. He says, without a Bezdin HaGadol, there's no way that any other Bezdin, as great as it might be, could be authorized to be Makadesh the Chodesh. The third element involved in determining the Chodesh and fulfilling the mitzvah HaChodesh Hazel Lachem is what's called the Ibur Shana, in which case it's necessary to add another month, which pushes all the months down, so to speak, to make room for that extra month, which is called Adar. Many Rishonim of the Monei HaMitzvos would count three different mitzvos, but the Rambam combines and integrates all these three elements under one rubric, counting them as one single mitzvah. And the reason for this is implicit in the Rambam's Shroshim in Sefer HaMitzvos, which is a very profound, incredible piece of work of the Rambam. And one of the Shroshim, I think it's number Yud Beis, if I remember correctly, presents the following formulation. Whenever there are many different parts to one mitzvah, then they're all integrated into one and counted as one. So I'll give just a prime example of this. In the mitzvah of Torah study, there are many different parts to the mitzvah. There's the father and his obligation vis-a-vis his son or his grandson. There's the obligation of a chacham, of a scholar, to teach the talmidim. There's an obligation of the talmidim to learn, and there might even be an obligation on the son to learn from his father. In addition, there is a mitzvah to know the Torah. Beyond that, there's a mitzvah to prepare for the implementation of the Torah, the Kiyum HaMitzvos. And you can add to that the mitzvah of daily learning, being koveas itim with Torah. All of these, whether it's learning or teaching, whether it's studying or transmitting Torah, are all integrated by the Rambam into one mitzvah, which he calls Talmud Torah. In Karbanos, we'll see it over and over again, where the Rambam is going to take various parts of the Avodas HaKarban, combine them all together, and formulate one mitzvah. And that's what he does here with the mitzvah of Kiddush HaChodesh. These various segments of the mitzvah, a whole bunch of responsibilities, are all integrated to form one whole. But whatever it is, the Rambam insists that it's got to be implemented by Beis Din HaGadol. The Ramban, as you'll see here, if you have the pages that David was kind enough to send out, you'll see it later on in this essay that the Ramban has a different approach. The Ramban holds that there were 40 years when the Beis Din HaGadol was still operating, even though it was after the Churban, and they were in Golus. The Beis Din HaGadol, as defined by the Rambam, has to be in the Lishkas HaGazis, in that office that was outside the Beis HaMikdash proper. And therefore, once they went into Golus, then they lose their status, because there's a principle called Hamakom Gorem. They have to be in a certain place. Once they forfeit their status because they went into Golus, they're no longer in the Beis HaMikdash, they forfeit that ability to be Mekadosh the Chodesh, because they're no longer Beis Din HaGadol. The Ramban assumes that if you have the makeup of these 71 elders, even if there's no Beis HaMikdash, they can still function as the Beis Din HaGadol. And that's indeed what happened historically, that for 40 years after the Churban, the Beis Din HaGadol was still functioning. Now, let me share with you an insight of my Rebbe that he repeats many, many times. And you'll find it written in many different Sfarim, especially in what's called Chidushei HaGram VaHagrid. Rav Soloveitchik asks the question today that we don't have a Beis Din HaGadol. Does that mean that the mitzvah of HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem Rosh Chodeshim goes down the tubes? Do we no longer have that mitzvah? And Rav Soloveitchik has many proofs, besides just intuitive logic, that that mitzvah is still incumbent, is still very much active and alive. But the question is, the Rambam says that there's no Kiddush HaChodesh without Beis Din HaGadol. We don't have a Beis Din HaGadol today. And Mirz Hashem will have one sooner than later, hopefully. You probably all heard the story about Rav Moshe Feinstein. He was wheeled into surgery, and his son-in-law, Dr. Moshe Tenlel of Hashem, was at his side. So Rav Moshe turns to his son-in-law, who was a doctor, and he asks him if this surgery will create a a blemish in his body, such that he could no longer serve on the Beis Din HaGadol. See the mindset of a giant. He wasn't a giant physically, by the way. He did not reach 5 feet, but that's not relevant. So if Soloveitchik comes up with a fascinating theory, a new thesis about what is the scope of the responsibility and the authority of the Beis Din HaGadol, a whole new approach. I call it a revolution. There are certain functions of Beis Gadol which are more, let's say, technical or legalistic. They're in charge of certain societal needs and documents. But there's another function of the Beis Gadol, and that is to represent Klal Yisrael. They are the authoritative representatives of Klal Yisrael. And the significance of that is that whenever there's a mitzvah that's incumbent upon the tzibur of Klal Yisrael, who is going to fulfill that mitzvah? Is it me? Is it Gershon? Is it David, who just joined us recently? Or maybe Joe's an old timer here. Who has that ability to implement a chovas tzibur? Do you represent the tzibur? Who represents the tzibur? Can I be the self-appointed messenger of Klal Yisrael so that I will be the long arm of the community of Israel and fulfill that chiyuv? So Rav Soloveitchik claims that that's the role of the Beis Gadol. They are shluchim to implement the obligation that's incumbent upon Klal Yisrael. Now follow the significance of that definition. In a time period where there is a Beis Gadol, no one could encroach upon their authoritative status as the representatives of Klal Yisrael. No one could come forward and say, no, I represent Klal Yisrael. But when the Beis Gadol is no longer functioning, then the obligation falls back on Klal Yisrael, because fundamentally from the onset, the obligation was not on Beis Gadol. Beis Gadol has certain obligations. They're in charge of Mini Melech, and they have, have to check out the Nevi'im, and there are many, many functions that they have to fulfill. But as far as something that's on the tzibur, Beis Gadol is not really the address. Beis Gadol is only the address because we need an authoritative representation of Klal Yisrael. But the real source of the mitzvah, in its wellspring, in its original form, is incumbent upon Klal Yisrael. But we just don't know who represents Klal Yisrael. Now, based on this, the Rav wants to assume that the mitzvah of Kiddush HaChodesh still applies today. Albeit we don't have Beis Gadol, but Klal Yisrael will find the way of establishing the Chodesh. And here's where the Rav comes up with a whole constellation of acts on the part of Klal Yisrael, maisim that are part of tefillah, are part of the tzibur, and they all are integrated into one whole to form a Kiddush HaChodesh. The first understanding, the first principle that we have to understand is cheshbon. Hillel Hasheni already organized a calendar many, many centuries ago, so that we have a calendar. The calendar serves the function of cheshbon, but now we have to get to Kiddush. And the Kiddush has to be that of Klal Yisrael. But based on that cheshbon, Klal Yisrael could move forward and be Mekadesh the Chodesh. How do we do that? We've got the cheshbon in our back pocket. Now we have to get to the Kiddush. And the story starts in the Shabbos before Rosh Chodesh. And that's called Hachroza. Hachroza means we announce the Chodesh. A lot of people, they go out and they schmooze and there's a Kiddush going on. Who wants to be distracted with the Kiddush HaChodesh? With the Hachroza. But the Hachroza is very important, and it ends with Chaverim Kol Yisrael, because that represents the fact that we're all part of one tzibur. So that in every single mini or microcosm of a tzibur all over the globe, we all agree that on such and such a day there'll be the Molad and Rosh Chodesh will take place. It's as if we were all integrated into one whole. And essentially, we now are able to establish the Chodesh. That's what we do on the Shabbos before Rosh Chodesh. Now let's fast forward. We're up to Rosh Chodesh itself. On Rosh Chodesh, the Tzibur will be Makadesh the Chodesh in many, many different ways. For example, they will recite Ya'aleh v'Yavo in Shmon Esrei, and they will add the words B'yom Rosh HaChodesh Hazeh. People don't realize that when they recite B'yom Rosh HaChodesh Hazeh, they are participating in a communal obligation of a mitzvah of HaChodesh Hazeh Lachem Rosh Chodoshim. And Chazal went very far with this. They said that if you omit Ya'aleh v'Yavo, you should daven again. The second dimension is Hallel. Now, whether a Hallel on Rosh Chodesh is Doraisa or D'Rabbanan is a gigantic debate. But be that as it may, even if I grant you that Hallel is D'Rabbanan, it is our method of expressing and declaring Rosh Chodesh. Today is Rosh Chodesh, we're saying Hallel. The reason why I'm tempted to think that it's Doraisa is because of a pasuk in Parshas Baloscha, where the Torah says, B'yom simchaschem, u'berashei chodshechem, etc. So Rosh Chodesh is mentioned in that parsha. And then Musaf is indicative of the special Kedushas Hayom of Rosh Chodesh. Now, you might ask me, what is the Kedushas Hayom of Rosh Chodesh? There's no Isur Malacha. It's not like a Yontif. It's not like a Shabbos. But the answer has to be that the Kedushas Hayom of Rosh Chodesh is the Karban Musaf. In fact, the Gemara in Erechim is very famous for saying that Hallel is only recited when there's a brand new Karban Musaf. If we repeat the same Karban that we did yesterday, like in the case of Pesach, where it's the same Karban day after day, then there's no Hallel on a Doraisa level. As opposed to Sukkot, where every day there's a new Karban that was not brought the day before. The Karban itself generates a Kedushas Hayom. Although we don't find a mitzvah of Seudah on Rosh Chodesh, but it does say in the poskim that one should try to enhance his Seudah on Rosh Chodesh. And that leads me to another method by which we Makadesh the Chodesh, and that's the recitation of Birkas HaMazon, where once again we're going to add Ya'aleh v'Yavo. So we've got Birkas HaMazon Ya'aleh v'Yavo, we have Tefillah Ya'aleh v'Yavo, we've got Tefillas Musaf, we have the Achroza before. Now, as far as Isur Malacha, there's a very strange halacha in Shulchan Aruch about the women folk. And apparently the women folk, or at least part of them, accepted upon themselves an Isur Malacha on Rosh Chodesh, which could only be understood in the light of the Kedushas Hayom of Rosh Chodesh. The most bizarre thing about Rosh Chodesh is that there's no mitzvah of kibud. Every day that's endowed with Kedusha has kibud. Kibud means wearing special clothing. You don't have to wear special clothing on Rosh Chodesh. Rosh Chodesh, in a certain sense, is a disguised moed. It's like in the shadows, behind the scenes. My Rebbe once compared it to two types of Gedolim. There are some Gedolim that you look at them, the way they dress, they got all the robes, all the fancy, on the head, and this and that. You know that, this is the giant. But there are others that dress just the way you and I dress, and that's a Rosh Chodesh Yid. He hides his greatness and his holiness behind ordinary begadim. So in that sense, philosophically, Rosh Chodesh represents the ability to up upgrade or to spiritualize that which is material, that which is physical. Now it's after Rosh Chodesh. We're still going to be Makadosh the Chodesh, and that's called Kiddush Levana. In Kiddush Levana, once again, we're going to join together as a community, and we're going to declare that is the new moon. There it is up in the sky. Do you have to see it? I don't know, but you have to know it's there, and it could be seen. That too is a replacement for the original Edus, the testimony on the Molad, which Beis Din HaGadol would receive. But again, you'll say, but we don't have a Beis Din HaGadol, so the mitzvah goes down the tubes. Nay, the mitzvah is still there. It's counted in Taryag because it's a mitzvah lidoros for all generations, because it really is the responsibility of Klal Yisrael. And in the absence of Beis Din HaGadol, it goes back to its original form, and that is Klal Yisrael. They are the originators of Kiddush HaChodesh. They will generate Kiddush HaChodesh. It's interesting that in Masechta Megillah, there's a whole debate about what's called a Shana Mu'uberes, on which of the two Adars should we be required to read the Megillah, whether it's out of Aleph or out of Beis. The Gemara's final conclusion and the poskim is that we read the Megillah in Adar Aleph, but nevertheless, Adar Beis is still part of the Ibur, because that's the month that we add. And that is a Kiddush, which is going to express itself not only in all the methods or expressions that we mentioned until now, but also there will be a Miktas Purim in Adar Beis. Now, since we mentioned Kiddush Levana, I want to point out to you that Rav Weiss, I don't have the sefer in front of me, unfortunately, but I have, David's email. So if you try to see what page it's on. Oh, yeah, the two different documents that David sent. This is a second document. So it's on page Tzadi Aleph. And this is a bracha that we recite going outside and we see the moon and so forth and so on. So if you'll turn to the second page in that folder, which is called Tzadi Beis, you'll see a fascinating machlokes between the Magen Avram and Reb Shlomo Kluger, the Chachma Shlomo. The Magen Avram writes in Simon Tov Chaf Vav, Noshin Peturos mi Kiddush Levana dahavi mitzvah seishas man groma. Is anyone here who's ever seen a woman or known of a woman, whether it's your wife, your grandmother, your mother, I don't know, your daughter, that goes out to do Kiddush Levana? I've never seen it. Maybe the feminist movement would try to institute it. And the truth is, I'm not sure if I would be objecting to that. I mean, tznius notwithstanding, we have to get a separate platform for the women. Maybe they could do it from their porches. I don't know. But because the assumption of the Magen Avram that Kiddush Levana is a mitzvah seishas man groma is a very shaky assumption, as the Chachma Shlomo points out. Now, I knew about this Chachma Shlomo many, many years ago because I learned it in a sefer called Mishmeres Chaim by Rav Pinchas Chaim Scheinberg, Zichrono Livracha. But Rav Weiss develops it beautifully. Why does the Chachma Shlomo reject the Magen Avram? And this you'll see on the top of your page, Tzadi Gimel. You may even see that certain words were bolded for emphasis. This Chachma Shlomo really touches on the very essential definition of Zman Grama. Loosely translated, Zman Grama means that the time, the element of time will generate the mitzvah, which would mean, and I could just gauge it by the fact that there's certain times when you cannot do the mitzvah. If you can't do the mitzvah at time X, only at time Y, then it means that the time itself generates the mitzvah. Says Reb Shlomo Kluger, that's a major mistake. Take, for example, I think it's a beautiful example, Birchas Hara'iyah. You know that we have many brachos that express gratitude to Hashem for certain phenomenon in nature, like new fruits growing on the trees. In Chodesh Nisan, we go out and we make Birchas Hailanos during certain periods of time. This fruit comes into the market. It's not there the rest of the year. Again, in Canada, I seem to recall that they had all the fruits the whole year round. That's one thing I loved about being in Canada. But here in Israel, for example, till we got our first strawberry, it took a long time. So we recite a bracha, we thank Hashem, Birchas Shechiyanu, and many other, there's a whole list of Birchas Haroah. But a lot of these brachas can only be made in certain times of the year. Should we say, therefore, according to Magen Avram, women are exempt from these brachos because it's a time-bound bracha? Impossible. It's an untenable position. So what then is mitzvah seishas mein groma? Again, intuitively, I would say, if there's a certain period of time where you cannot fulfill the mitzvah, and the mitzvah therefore is limited in time, it's restricted in time, that makes it zman grama. Women are exempt. And farta genesek. That can't be true. Now, keep in mind, as we go through this, the Ramban says, unless it's a mistake in the text, that a woman is obligated in Sfiras HaOmer. Did you get that? I don't know if I would encourage the women to count the Omer because there's one shita that you have to get 49 or bust. And, to find a woman who will do 40, even a man who will do consecutively 49, lo pashut. How could the Ramban say that Sfiras HaOmer is mitzvah saseh ein hazman groma? It's not a time-bound mitzvah. It's not a time-generated mitzvah when you can only fulfill this mitzvah in 49 days out of the entire year. Okay, so here's where the Chachma Shlomo comes up with a brilliant idea, very profound. I'm going to try the best if I can to convince you, to seduce you, to accept his logic. But once you do, there's no going backwards, I'm telling you. It is so powerful. The Chachma Shlomo points out that there are two categories of mitzvos that can only be fulfilled at certain periods of time and are time-bound, time-limited. These two categories are fundamentally different one from the other. We'll call them category A and category B. Category A is a mitzvah whose Maisa, the Maisa mitzvah, the act of the mitzvah, is appropriate and is feasible the whole year round. But the Torah said, no, we're going to tie this mitzvah down to a time period. I'll come back and I'll expand upon this a little bit later, but now let's go on to category B. Category B is a Maisa mitzvah which is only shayach, it's only appropriate during certain periods of time because it depends upon a condition. And that condition, in the world as we know it, only emerges and can only be fulfilled during certain periods of time. That's category B. So let's go over it once again. And then I want you to guess which of the two is man grum, A or B. A is a mitzvah that is in and of itself, if I isolate the Maisa mitzvah, could be fulfilled the entire year round, but the Torah bound it and said that it's going to be generated by a certain time. Category B is a mitzvah that depends upon something which is only there at certain periods of time. If it's not there, then there's no mitzvah. So it's not that the Torah said, I'm going to bind it down with a time period such that the mitzvah is generated by time. No. The mitzvah is generated by X. X only appears for part of the time, and therefore the mitzvah only is applicable, is only shayach at that time period of time. So, Rabbosa, you tell me, which of these two categories, A or B, defines Zman Groma? Anybody want to take a stab at it? I mean, it's a 50% chance you'll get it right.
Well, it has to be. I mean, it has to be that you can possibly do it every time, but we demand that you do it at a certain.
Do you remember which number that was, Joe? Just for the record, A or B? Well, you forgot.
No, I have no idea.
Okay, so I gave you A and I gave you B. So Joe has it right. It's A. A was a mitzvah that could, in and of itself, be fulfilled the whole year round. The mitzvah, by its very nature, is not tied down to any time period, just that the Torah said that it's a time-generated mitzvah. But the action itself, the Maisa mitzvah, etzem ha-Maisa, efshel l'kayma b'chol zman, to use the language here of the Minchas Osher. So, for example, what are we today? Gimel Shvat? What number in Shvat are we? I forget. Maybe we're Dalet already?
Gimel. Rosh HaChodesh was Monday.
Monday. Okay. I thought it was Sunday, Monday.
Gimel.
So we're Gimel Shvat. Oh, if it's Gimel Shvat, I want to dedicate this year in memory of my father's Rebbe, Rav Moshe Soloveitchik. So now it's Gimel Shvat. Can I take out a shofar and blow it? I'm not asking you whether I have a mitzvah or not. I'm asking you, can I take a shofar and blow it? The answer is yes. I have a shofar right here. I'll blow it. Can I shake a lulav the whole year round? Can I sit in sukkah the whole year round? Can I eat matzah the whole year round? The action per se is not time bound, but the Torah says that that mitzvah is generated by a certain time, and that makes it into Zman Groma. Says the Chachma Shlomo, you cannot apply that to category B. Like, for example, the mitzvah of Birchas HaLevana. After the 14th day of the Hebrew calendar month, the lunar calendar, there is no Levana. Now, the mitzvah is to recite a bracha over the Levana b'chidusha. Chidusha means while it's waxing, not when it's disappearing in the sky. That's not a Levana b'chidusha. The mitzvah per se only applies at a certain period of time. Not because the Torah says that the time generates that mitzvah, but because the mitzvah is dependent upon something in nature. So, for example, if I have a new fruit and I'm obligated to recite Shechiyanu, that's not a Zman Groma. Of course, I couldn't recite Shechiyanu yesterday because I didn't have the new fruit. And if this be the case, not only are women going to be obligated in Birkas Halavano, like any Birkas Hodah, on a natural phenomenon, because even though the natural phenomenon only exists and emerges within a certain time period, that doesn't make it Zman Groma, but women are going to be obligated in Sfiras HaOmer. And that's the Ramban's logic. I could count the Omer today. I'm not sure exactly what number we're up to, but we're probably up to about number 270, I don't know, in the Omer. But no. There is no Omer. The Omer is brought on a certain day. My counting is the counting of the Omer. So the mitzvah really depends upon the Omer. The mitzvah of counting depends upon the Omer. If there's an Omer, I can count. If there's no Omer, so the Torah says that from the day of the Omer until they bring the Shtei Lechem, those are the days of the Omer. But my mitzvah depends upon the Omer. Just 1 second, Joe. I just want to, before I forget. What I think I saw in Rav Scheinberg, but I'm not sure. If not, we'll say it ourselves. Is that this could possibly shed a light on the mitzvah bikurim. The Gemara tells us that bikurim can only be fulfilled, bringing from your new fruits to the Beis Hamikdash, up until Chanukah time. Has nothing to do with the holiday of Chanukah. But that's the time at Shekola Regel Minashuk, meaning not Regel Minashuk, but it means the Chayil Isod, meaning the new crop is only available in Eretz Yisrael up until that point. The mitzvah bikurim is to bring from the new fruit when it's a new fruit, meaning when it's growing out there in the fields. There's a certain deadline after which that fruit, that species, is no longer growing in the fields. So the mitzvah doesn't emerge. So it's not like shofar and lulav and sukkah where you can do the mitzvah the whole year round. You can only do the mitzvah when that phenomenon is there. Like we said, the new moon, or in the case of Omer, the Omer, or in this case, where the fruits are there in the field. It's again a mitzvah that depends upon the reality of nature, the physical nature, but it's not generated by Zman. So our original definition, which was our knee-jerk response to defining Zman Groma, that there's a certain period of time that we can't fulfill the mitzvah, that's no longer correct. Joe?
So I've heard this before, and just asking the Rav, one of the reasons that I've always understood for women being pater is because they have other things that they have to do, right? That their responsibilities with regards to family.
I'm not sure exactly how that works, but yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, that's what, I don't know if it was just I'm saying now it sounds like this is a cop-out, because basically this knocks that whole concept away.
So listen, Joe, whatever you heard until today about Zman Groma should come under the category of Ta'amei HaMitzvos. If I know of a woman who is totally free of any responsibility, she has no children to raise, she has no dishes to wash, she has no husband to take care of, or her husband is well cared for, she's a princess who has plenty of servants. Tamei HaMikra is very nice if you're giving a seminar to a group of kids who don't know anything about Yiddishkeit, but don't swallow it. It's purely, again, I don't want to put down the Rambam, but the Moreh Nevuchim is excellent for that kind of Tamei HaMikra. But we should never... Zman Groma is a conceptual definition. It has to be defined very, very carefully. And we're not going to ask whether a woman has the time or she doesn't have the time, she's too busy, she can't do it. In fact, the mitzvah of Kriyat Shema might be time bound. We're not 100% sure if women are obligated in Kriyat Shema. Why? Because it's Yom and Laila. Any mitzvah that depends upon Yom and Laila might be considered time bound. Now, a woman, if she wants to recite Kriyat Shema, will give her plenty of time to do that. In Kriyat Shema Shel Arvis, for example, she's got the whole night. In the winter, that could give her like 16 hours. If you're in Finland, that could give you 6 months. You know what I mean? I wouldn't worry about a woman being too preoccupied. The definition of Zman Groma does not depend upon how busy a woman is or how long the mitzvah will last. You could have a mitzvah that lasts only a day and it's not Zman Groma. You could have a mitzvah that lasts a whole year and it's Zman Groma. Zman Groma is a conceptual principle in halacha that has to be well defined. Is it caused by Zman? Is it not caused by Zman? If you ask me, Joe, about Tamei mitzvahs, I think that what you said is appropriate for an Eved. An Eved, like an Isha, is potter from Zman Groma, but it's fundamentally different than an Isha. An Isha really should be doing a Zman Groma, but the Torah said, all right, for whatever reason. But Eved, maybe his time, is not his. He doesn't own his time.
So okay, so saying that exactly, I was thinking about that also. But you're going to say, but if it's like this, then the Evid's going to have to do these mitzvahs as well.
Yeah, that's right. We'll give him 14 days. We'll force his Adon, his master, to give him a couple of minutes to go out and be Mekadosh Levana. Nishkeferla. But one second, I had an idea. I want to end the shir with one idea that crossed my mind. Let me just think for a second. Yeah, this is interesting. The mitzvahs of Shabbos apply to women for a whole different reason. In fact, the Gemara asks, why are women obligated in mitzvahs of Shabbos? They're all Zman Groma. And the Gemara answers because of a hekesh between Zachar and Shomer, Kol Sheyeshno B'Shmir, Yeshno B'Schira. But without that hekesh, women would be exempt from the mitzvahs of Shabbos. Now, let's take, for example, the mitzvah of Kiddush. Today is Wednesday, right? Can I be Mekadosh on Wednesday? So what's Rav Shlomo Kluger going to say about this? The mitzvahs of Shabbos are classified as man groma, yet it's not like shofar that I could blow the whole year round. I can't recite Kiddush the whole week long. So I believe, again, we have to invoke the Ramban, who says that when it says in the Torah, Zocher es Yom HaShabbos L'Kadsho, it's not referring to the Shabbos itself, but the whole week long we should be remembering the Shabbos. And basically, he develops a thesis according to which Beis Hillel agree fundamentally to Beit Shammai that if I have a good piece of meat or a good pair of, suit, I should put it aside for Shabbos. The only thing is that Beis Hillel had a bitachon, a special midah bitachon that God will provide me for the Shabbos. I don't have to worry about eating the steak on Wednesday. I'll get another steak for Shabbos. But basically, according to the Ramban, the mitzvah of Zochar Yom Shabbos L'Kadsho applies tamid. And I saw in a sefer that was just published yesterday, by the way, in which the author claims that there should be a seventh mitzvah added to the list of 6 mitzvahs of the Sefer HaChinuch that are mitzvos tmidios, that are constant mitzvos. And we should add the mitzvah of Zachar Yom Shabbos L'Kadsho, according to the Ramban, it's also a mitzvah tmidis. And I get a mazel tov for publishing that sefer. It's very exciting for me. I got it yesterday. I mean, I only got a batch, but the distributor is going to put it out in shuls. I mean, I pay for that, but put it out in shuls throughout Yerushalayim and Beit Shemesh and Bnei Brak on Sunday, and then it lasts for 5 days. Then he gives me back whatever nobody buys. I don't know how much I'll be left with, but they gave me a batch up front. So that's called Hagigayos. And if I was with you instead of Zoom, I would have brought my schnapps so we can make a Kiddush.
You don't. You have a picture. You have the one there. Can you show us one?
I have a picture of the flyer, which is also a picture of the sha'ar, the inside.
Okay.
So
Can
I
we see
sent
it?
it to David, and I asked David, I don't know if he got it yet, that if he could put it up on the
Okay.
email
Okay.
for the group. I don't know how to
That's
take. I still haven't learned the technology how to take a WhatsApp and put it on email. I mean, it's probably very simple.
that's beautiful. That's so wonderful. Mazel tov,
Yeah,
Rav.
yeah. There's a Zeifman page there. You'll see it.
Yep.
Okay. In any event, I want to take this opportunity to thank you all for joining me. Next week, I'd like to learn with you a sugya. We'll leave Minchas Asher on the side in Masechta Kiddush and Daf Chav Tes. It's on Amud Aleph and on Amud Beis, so we can't finish it in one sitting. It may take a few weeks, but it's a very brilliant sugya, and I think it gives us a derech halimud. So I'm going to ask either David or maybe each one of you could just bring a Gemara Kiddushin. I'm sure that in the shul in Clanton Park there are plenty of Gemaras Kiddushin. Maybe they don't let you take it out. I don't know what the rules are there. Okay then. So shkoyach, everyone should have a great
Thank you.
week.